The raven came at dawn, black wings beating hard against the cold winds of the north. Ned Stark stood in the godswood of Winterfell, his breath turning to mist, his face hard with worry. The message was short but heavy. King Robert was in danger. The words came from Varys the Spider. Strange, Ned thought, that a man like him would send such a warning. But the message was clear. The Lannisters were planning something deadly. Ned didn't hesitate. He knew Robert wouldn't see the threat coming. His old friend had grown careless, drunk with power, blinded by love for Cersei. But Ned knew the Lannisters. He saw the way Jaime watched Robert. He remembered the way Cersei's eyes held no warmth, only calculation. And he knew one thing. If Robert died now, the realm would burn. He left Winterfell that same night. By the time Ned reached King's Landing, Robert was already planning a hunting trip. It sounded harmless. But Varys's warning echoed in Ned's mind. A boar hunt with too much wine and not enough guards? It smelled like death. Ned met Robert in his chambers. "You're not going," he said, firm and cold. Robert laughed, holding a cup of wine. "Since when do you give me orders, Stark?" Ned stepped forward. "Since the Lannisters want you dead." The smile dropped from Robert's face. "You've been king too long, Robert. You've made too many enemies. And your wife, she's not who you think she is." Robert looked at him. "What are you saying?" Ned didn't hold back. "I believe your life is in danger. If you ride out tomorrow, you won't come back." Robert stared into the fire for a long moment. The wine in his hand suddenly felt too heavy. His heart remembered Jon Arryn, how quickly he died after asking questions. And now Ned, his oldest friend, was standing in front of him with fear in his eyes. He didn't laugh this time. He just nodded. "Then we cancel the hunt." That night Robert didn't sleep. Neither did Ned. They both knew that something had changed. The game had begun, and now Ned had made the first move, but it didn't end there. The next day, Robert announced a small council meeting. He looked stronger now, sober, focused. The wine was gone from his hand. Cersei looked nervous. Littlefinger smiled too easily. Renly kept glancing at the door. Robert stood up. "Someone in this room planned my death." The chamber fell silent. Varys blinked. Pycelle shifted in his seat. Cersei's face froze. "I was meant to die on that hunt," Robert said. "I know it now. And I want the truth." No one spoke. Then Ned stepped forward. "Your Grace," he said, "with your leave I will investigate this, fully, no more secrets." Robert looked at him and nodded. That same day, guards were doubled at the gates. Jaime Lannister left the Red Keep without a word. Cersei didn't appear at dinner. Ned knew it wasn't over. He had only bought Robert time. The Lannisters would strike again. And this time, it would be more than just a boar. But for now, the king was alive, and the war hadn't begun. Yet. 2 days passed since Robert cancelled the hunt. The Red Keep had never felt this quiet. Servants whispered in corners. Guards stood tenser than before. Something had changed. People could feel it in the air, and Cersei Lannister was furious. She slammed her goblet on the table in her chamber, wine splashing on the floor. Jaime stood beside the window, arms crossed. "You said the boar would take care of him," she hissed. "And now he sits on the throne, sober and suspicious." Jaime sighed. "I warned you. Ned Stark is no fool. We should have moved faster." Cersei paced like a lioness in a cage. "That northern wolf has his claws too deep. Robert listens to him now. If Stark finds out about the children—" Jaime turned, his voice sharper. "Then we kill him, before he does." But Cersei shook her head. "No, not yet. If we strike now, it'll be war." In the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark read through old letters and scrolls. Each word carried a weight, each name a warning. He had sent trusted men to question the old servants of Jon Arryn, to visit the blacksmiths who trained apprentices with dark hair and strong features. Every answer brought him closer to a truth he already feared. The king's children, Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen, were not Roberts. They were Lannisters. Jaime's. It made his blood boil. Not because of the dishonor, but because of the risk. Robert's heir was a lie. If Robert died and Joffrey took the throne, the realm would fall into chaos. Ned needed to tell Robert. But how? The man had just escaped death. Dropping such a truth would crush him. But the longer Ned waited, the stronger the Lannisters would grow. He decided that night no more delays. The next morning, Robert sat in the royal gardens. He looked tired, as if 10 years had passed in just a few days. His hand gripped a letter from Dawn, but his eyes were distant. He heard footsteps and turned. It was Ned. "You look worse than me," Robert joked, forcing a smile. Ned didn't smile back. "I have something to tell you." "But it won't be easy," Robert raised a brow. "Go on then. Let's hear it." Ned sat down across from him, lowering his voice. "I know why John Arryn died. He found something. Something about your children." Robert's face darkened. "What about them?" Ned looked him in the eye. "They're not yours, Robert. They were never yours. Cersei lied to you." Silence fell between them. Robert didn't speak. He didn't blink. His hand slowly crumpled the letter he was holding. "You're telling me my queen gave me another man's children?" Ned corrected him, quiet but firm. "Not just another man. Jaime Lannister." Robert stood suddenly, knocking the bench over. His breath was heavy. His hands clenched into fists. "That whore," he growled. "That golden-haired whore." Ned stood too. "We must act, Robert, now, before she runs or tries to strike again." But Robert's face changed, not rage, but pain. "All these years, I loved her once. I thought I had a family. You have a kingdom, Robert, and that kingdom needs a true heir." Robert nodded slowly. "Joffrey will never sit on my throne. Not while I breathe." That night, Robert called another council meeting. Only trusted men were invited. Ned, Sir Barristan Selmy, Renly Baratheon, and Stannis, freshly returned from Dragonstone. Cersei was not present. Nor was Littlefinger. Varys came but quietly observed. Robert stood before them and declared the unthinkable. "The children of Queen Cersei are not of my blood. I declare them illegitimate. They are to be removed from the line of succession." The room gasped. Even Stannis blinked, surprised. Robert turned to him. "You are my true heir, brother. Prepare yourself." Stannis nodded once, silently. Renly looked pale. Varys remained still, like a shadow. Then Ned stepped forward. "Your Grace, Cersei will not go quietly." "She will resist," Robert answered. "Then let her. I'll send her back to Casterly Rock in chains if I must." But before any plan could be made, a guard burst into the room. "Your Grace," he shouted, "the Queen is gone. She left the Red Keep, with the children. And Ser Jaime." Ned felt his stomach sink. The lioness had fled. The war had already begun, but this time it wasn't whispers in the dark. It was real, open, dangerous. Robert sat back down, rubbing his temples. "Then we ride at dawn. We end this now." And so, the king who once drank and laughed, now prepared for war against his own queen. The sun hadn't even risen when the gates of King's Landing opened. For the first time that day, dozens of gold cloaks marched out, followed by a company of the king's own guard, armored and armed. At the front rode Robert Baratheon himself, no longer drunk or distracted, but grim and determined. Beside him, Ned Stark rode silent, his eyes fixed ahead. Cersei had taken the children and vanished in the night, riding west toward Casterly Rock, protected by Lannister knights and led by Jaime himself. They had fled fast, leaving the capital before Robert could name Stannis as heir. But they hadn't escaped unnoticed. Ravens were already flying to every corner of the realm. Robert's command was simple. Bring them back, alive, if possible. But no mercy if they resist. In the Red Keep, chaos spread like wildfire. The Queen was gone, and rumors ran wild through the halls. Servants whispered of poison, of dark magic, of secret tunnels. Some said the Queen had cursed the king. Others believed Ned Stark had taken control. Littlefinger returned late that morning. He walked into the small council chamber, a fake smile on his lips. "I leave the city for a single night," he said, "and I return to find the lioness has run. And the wolf stands beside the stag." Ned stood to face him. "You knew, didn't you?" Littlefinger shrugged. "I know many things. I knew Robert loved her blindly. I knew she was dangerous. But I also know power shifts like the wind. Today it blows north. Tomorrow—" Ned didn't trust him, never had. But for now, they needed information more than loyalty. "Where will she go?" Littlefinger's eyes narrowed. Not just to Casterly Rock. Tywin Lannister is no fool. He won't let his grandchildren be taken without blood. He'll raise his banners, call his bannermen, and he'll make sure every lord in the Westerlands knows the king is chasing his queen. So it's war, Ned said. No, Littlefinger replied, voice low. Not yet, but it's close. In the west, Cersei's company reached Harrenhal by nightfall. The old castle was half ruined, but still strong. Jaime pushed open the great doors himself and led them inside. We stay here until father sends word, he told her. Cersei's face was pale, but her voice was firm. And if Robert comes? Jaime smiled. Then we remind him why lions rule the jungle. The children sat quietly near the fire. Joffrey looked confused, angry. Myrcella clung to her scepter. Tommen just cried. They're scared, Cersei whispered. They should be, Jaime replied. This isn't a game anymore. That night a raven arrived from Casterly Rock. Tywin's message was short and cold. Hold the castle. Reinforcements ride at dawn. Do not lose the boy. Cersei burned the letter after reading it. She knew what Tywin meant. Joffrey was their key, not just to the throne, but to rallying the realm. If they lost him, they lost everything. Back in King's Landing, Stannis sat at the painted table, the same one Aegon used to plan his conquest. He stared at the map of Westeros, fingers tapping slowly. The storm is coming, he muttered. Renly scoffed. You've always said that, Stannis glared at him. Because it's always true. Robert entered still in armor, the dust of the road on his boots. He looked at both his brothers. Stannis, you're my heir now. I want you to hold the city while I ride west with Stark. If something happens to me... You mean if Cersei kills you? Renly interrupted. Robert ignored him. Then you take the crown. Not the boy, not a Lannister, you. Stannis gave a single nod. Renly, however, didn't speak, not yet. But behind his calm face, thoughts were moving quickly. Dangerous thoughts. Ned stood on the battlements later that night, watching torches flicker below. A storm was coming, both in the sky and in the realm. For the first time, he felt the full weight of it. This wasn't just about one lie. It was about houses, names, honor, and who would rule the Seven Kingdoms. Maester Pycelle had sent a raven to the Vale. The Eyrie might stay neutral, or it might rise with the Starks. Ned had also sent word to Riverrun. The Tullys would choose sides soon, but the most troubling part was the North. He hadn't heard from Robb in weeks. If war began, the North would be called. And Ned feared his son might ride to war before he was ready. Still, Robert had stood tall. He hadn't been the old drunk friend from Winterfell. Not if he was a king again. And as long as Robert stood, they still had a chance. But deep in his heart, Ned knew one terrible truth. The Lannisters never run without a plan. And whatever Cersei was planning now would not be a retreat. The raven arrived at dawn. It came from the west, stained by rain and dirt, its wings heavy. Ned opened the scroll with cold hands and read the message twice. Then a third time. His jaw tightened. He walked straight to Robert's chambers without a word. Robert was sharpening his sword, a rare sight these days. He had already dismissed his squires and poured his own wine, but hadn't touched a drop. Ned handed him the scroll. Robert read it slowly. The more he read, the darker his eyes became. It's begun, he muttered. The message was from Sir Edmure Tully of Riverrun. Tywin Lannister had crossed the Golden Tooth with 20,000 men. The banners of House Lannister were flying, and mercenaries from Essos rode with them. Worse, they had sacked Fairmarket, a river town loyal to the crown. Dozens were dead. Hundreds more taken prisoner. To 20,000, Robert said again. He means to fight, not to talk, Ned nodded. And Cersei still holds Harrenhal. If she opens the gates to Tywin's army, then they'll control the heart of the Riverlands, Robert finished. 7 hells, but Ned's eyes were sharper now. We must ride now. Before he moves further east, Robert slammed his sword on the table. Then we ride. Call the banners. Tell Stannis to guard King's Landing like his life depends on it, because it does. He paused. And if Renly even whispers about a crown, I'll cut off his pretty little head. 3 days later, Robert and Ned rode west at the head of a great host. Banners from the Crown Lands, Stormlands, and even the Vale riding beside them. Lord Arryn's son, young and weak, had remained in the Eyrie, but many knights of the Vale rode for Robert now, their honour bound to Ned. It felt like the days of old, two friends riding to war together. But the shadow of betrayal rode with them. Behind them, Renly stayed behind in King's Landing, whispering in corners, gathering allies of his own. Stannis held the Red Keep, but even he couldn't see what his brother was plotting. At Harrenhal, the Lannisters had made their move. Cersei sat at the high table, watching as Tywin entered the hall. The great lion of House Lannister, cold, composed, dressed in gold-trimmed red. He looked at her, then at Jaime. "You were foolish to flee without my order," he said. "I saved the children," Cersei replied. "You should thank me." Tywin's voice was sharp. "I don't thank people who start wars before I'm ready." Jaime stepped forward. "You're here now, father." "That means you're ready enough." Tywin didn't answer. He walked past them and sat at the war table. "Our scouts report that Robert marches with 10,000 men, another 5,000 from the Vale ride to join him. If we meet him head-on, we risk heavy losses." Cersei leaned forward. "Then what do we do?" Tywin's eyes narrowed. "We don't fight Robert. We bleed him. Burn the river villages behind him. Cut the food lines. Make the lords question his strength. By the time we face him, he'll be weak and alone. And Ned Stark?" Jaime asked. "We isolate him," Tywin said. "And then we end him." By the end of the week, the Riverlands were burning. Smoke rose from small villages, fields were torched, and frightened farmers fled toward Riverrun. Everywhere the Lannisters passed, they left a mark, not always of death, but of power. Robert's army moved slower now, trying to help, to feed, to protect. But every mile they gained, they lost something too: men, morale, or time. In camp, Ned stood over the map again. "They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to slow us down," Robert nodded. "Tywin is trying to break us before we meet him, and if we fall into his trap—" Robert looked up at him. "Then we die with swords in our hands." "But we don't turn back." That night, ravens were sent to Winterfell, to Riverrun, and to the Eyrie. Ned knew they needed more men, more strength. But he feared one truth more than any other. They were walking into the lion's teeth. In the north, Robb Stark stood in the Great Hall, reading his father's letter. He looked up at Maester Luwin. "The Lannisters have declared war. My father rides with the king." Robb was only 16, but there was something in his eyes now, something new. "Send word to the bannermen," he said. "Tell them the Starks are riding to war." And far to the south, in the shadows of the Red Keep, Varys whispered to himself, "The realm is bleeding, and no one can stop it now." The night sky over the Riverlands was black, broken only by the glow of distant fires. The air stank of smoke and scorched grain. Farmers wept beside ruined homes, and the bodies of sheep and soldiers alike rotted in the fields. War had arrived, but not with trumpets and glory. It came with fire, steel, and silence. Ned Stark stood on a small hill outside the village of Stonehenge, staring down at the Lannister banners moving in the distance. Red lions on gold cloth, marching proudly through the smoke. Tywin's men were bold, burning villages in daylight now, not hiding, but they hadn't attacked Robert's army directly. "Not yet, they're toying with us," Ned muttered. Beside him, Sir Barristan Selmy nodded. "They want us to chase them, to stretch ourselves thin." Robert arrived a moment later, his armor dusty, his eyes weary. "Let them run. I'm done playing games." He turned to the gathered lords. "We march at first light. We cut off their road to Harrenhal and force Tywin to fight us, face to face." Some agreed. Others hesitated. Lord Grafton of Gulltown spoke up uncertain. "What if it's a trap, your grace?" Robert's voice was sharp. "Everything in war is a trap, but I've got steel men and fire in my belly. Let Tywin come." Ned didn't speak, not yet, but something felt off. Tywin Lannister was many things, but reckless wasn't one of them. If he was provoking Robert into battle now, it meant he believed he could win. Still, there was no turning back. By the next morning, Robert's host had moved swiftly, heading for the fields south of Harrenhal. It was there, just east of the Blackwater rush, that they saw the Lannister army waiting, 20,000 men, ranks of spearmen, knights in golden armor, banners fluttering like fire in the wind. Tywin Lannister stood atop a black horse, cold and unmoving. Beside him, Jaime Lannister wore his white cloak and a crooked smile, his hand never far from his sword. Robert's men took position on a ridge. Ned rode through the lines, checking on every company. The northern men were ready, though young. The Vale's knights stood proud, and the Stormlords sang songs of death and victory. But behind all the courage there was fear too. As the sun rose higher, the horns blew, and the first true battle of the war began. It started with arrows, clouds of them. The sky darkened with shafts, and screams followed. Horses panicked. Shields clashed. Men fell. Then came the charge. Robert led the first wave himself, hammer in hand. His old fury awakened. He roared like the warrior he once was. His men followed without hesitation. Ned fought beside him, sword flashing, heart pounding. He had fought in wars before, against the Targaryens, against the Greyjoys, but this was different. This was betrayal. Civil war, brother against brother. Noble houses tearing themselves apart. The Lannisters held strong at first. Jaime danced through the battlefield like a golden blur, cutting down knights with ease. But the northern spears pushed forward, driving into the Lannister flank. Hours passed. Blood turned the grass to mud. The dead piled up like broken statues. Then came the break. Robert spotted a gap, a crack in Tywin's center. Without waiting, he pushed his cavalry forward, smashing through with thunder and steel. Ned followed, cutting down a knight whose sigil he didn't even recognize. It was chaos, fire and death and screaming. By nightfall, the field was silent. The battle was won. Tywin had retreated, leaving behind over 5,000 dead. His right flank had collapsed under pressure from the Vale Knights. His center had broken before Robert's fury. Robert stood over the battlefield, his hammer bloodied, his armor dented, but there was no joy in his eyes. Ned came to him quietly. "We won," Robert stared at the dead. "Aye, and how many sons will never come home tonight?" Ned didn't answer. Then Robert turned. "Where's Jaime?" Ned froze. He hadn't seen Jaime fall, hadn't seen him retreat either. A scout rode up fast. Sir Jaime escaped. He led 2,000 men west, toward the river. Robert's jaw clenched. Then he's going to Casterly Rock, or worse. River Run, Ned's heart sank. If the Lannisters struck River Run, it would pull House Tully fully into the war and risk another front. Robert looked out toward the west. "This isn't over," he said. "It's only begun." That night, the tents were filled with pain. Maesters worked on the wounded while lords argued about supplies, about prisoners, about the next move. Songs were sung for the dead, but quietly. Even victory had tasted bitter. In his tent, Ned wrote to Robb. He told him of the battle, the cost, the Lannister retreat. He ended the letter with a warning: "Trust no raven that comes from Casterly Rock, and keep your sword close. The lion has bled, but he is not finished." Far away, in the high halls of Casterly Rock, Cersei stood at the war table with Tywin. Jaime at her side. "They beat you," she said. Her voice cold. Tywin didn't even blink. "We lost a battle, not the war." He turned to a second map, one marked not with swords but with gold. "Let them think they're winning. While they count corpses, we'll buy their allies, break their bannermen, starve their armies." He looked at her. "Victory is not won with swords alone. It's won with patience, and with betrayal." Cersei smiled. The morning after the Battle of the Blackwater Fields was quiet, too quiet. A heavy mist rolled over the burnt grass, covering the blood-soaked land in a cold silence. Crows had begun their grim work. The moans of the dying echoed faintly across the camp, but no horns blew, no men cheered. Robert Baratheon sat alone, staring into a goblet of wine he hadn't yet touched. His face was hollow, his eyes empty. For once, the great stag of the realm looked more like a tired old man than a king. Ned Stark entered the tent without being announced. He had dried blood on his cloak, but his hands were clean. Too clean. Robert didn't look up. "How many?" he asked quietly. Ned sighed. "Nearly 3,000 dead on our side. Twice that for the Lannisters, and what did we gain? Robert muttered. A burned field and a broken back. Ned didn't answer. He understood. They had won the battle, but peace still felt far away. Tywin had pulled back before total defeat. Jaime had escaped, and now word had come that River Run was under siege. Catelyn's home. Ned had barely slept. The thought of her father, her brother, surrounded by Lannister steel, it clawed at him like a wolf in a cage. They're forcing our hand, he said. If River Run falls, the Tullys fall with it. Robert finally looked up. Then we ride. Again. 7 hells, Ned. How many more men do I have to bury before this ends? Before Ned could speak, a messenger entered, a young squire, pale and shaking. He held a letter with the seal of House Florent. Robert snatched it. His eyes scanned the lines quickly. Then he threw it across the tent. What now? Ned asked. Robert's face twisted in disgust. Renly. What about him? Robert spat. He's crowned himself. In Storm's End. Claims the people need a younger king. Claims I've gone mad. Ned stared at him, speechless. Renly Baratheon. The boy with the pretty smile and soft hands. The one who barely held a sword in his youth. Now wearing a crown, the words tasted like poison. Robert stood, furious now. My own brother. While I fight lions, he sharpens daggers in my back. Ned's voice was quiet but firm. We always knew he was ambitious. But this is dangerous. If he gains support, he already has. Robert barked. House Tyrell has declared for him. They've sent him 10,000 men, gold, supplies. Ned's chest tightened. He's not just rebelling. He's planning to win. Robert kicked over the wine table, goblet shattering across the floor. He wants the throne so badly? Let him come and take it from my cold hands. But Ned wasn't listening anymore. His mind was racing. If Renly had the reach, and Tywin still held the Westerlands. They were now surrounded, and then it got worse. That night, as the camp prepared to march east toward River Run, another raven arrived. This one bearing the direwolf sigil of House Stark. It was from Robb. Ned read it by candlelight, alone in his tent. The words were careful but clear. Robb had called the banners. The North was marching, and they had captured Jaime Lannister. Ned's hand trembled slightly. Captured alive the Kingslayer. In chains. It should have been good news. A victory. But somehow, it felt like the storm was only getting worse, because Ned knew how Cersei would react. And more importantly, he knew what Tywin would do to get his golden son back. Far to the west, in the great halls of Casterly Rock, Cersei screamed when she heard the news. They've taken Jaime? She shrieked. Tywin's jaw clenched. Robb Stark is bolder than I thought. Cersei paced like a wild cat. Then we crush him. We march north, and we burn Winterfell to the ground. But Tywin didn't move. He stared at the raven's message, reading between the lines. No, he said coldly. We don't march. We negotiate. Cersei blinked. What? We offer peace, Tywin said. A fake one. We ask to parley. Trade prisoners. Invite Ned Stark to speak, alone. And then, she asked. Tywin's eyes were like ice. Then we kill him. Back in the Riverlands, Robert paced his tent while Ned read Robb's letter again. The young wolf had moved fast, faster than any had expected. He's not a boy anymore, Robert muttered. He's becoming his father. Ned didn't smile. He felt no pride in that. Before dawn, a new rider came from the east. He carried no house sigil, only a simple flag of truce. A message from Lord Tywin, the man said. Robert took it, expecting threats. But instead, it was a request, a meeting, a peace offering, a prisoner exchange. Ned stared at the letter. He didn't trust it. But Robert's eyes lit up with something close to hope. Maybe we can end this without burning the realm down. But Ned had seen enough war and enough Lannisters to know one thing for sure. When lions smile, it means they're about to strike. The raven carried only a few lines, written in Tywin Lannister's sharp, perfect hand. In the interest of peace, I propose a parley. Lord Eddard Stark shall come alone to the bridge at Maidenpool. Jaime Lannister will be discussed. The war does not need to continue if reason remains. Robert crushed the letter in his fist. Reason, he spat. Tywin talks of reason after burning half the Riverlands and marching on River Run, but Ned's eyes never left the words. He read them again and again, not for meaning, but for danger. Every sentence felt like a trap wrapped in silk. "Still," he said softly, "he's making a move, and it means he's scared. Or pretending to be." Robert looked at him. "You think it's real?" Ned sighed. "No, but I think we need to answer it. You're not going. I have to." Robert stood. "You go there alone. You're not coming back. You know that, right? You'll vanish, and the next raven I get will carry your head." Ned looked at him steady. "And if I don't go, we'll lose the one thing that might end this without more sons dying." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Robert turned away, hand on his brow. "I hate this," he muttered. "I hate politics. I hate tricks. Give me a hammer and a clean battlefield." But the battlefield was no longer clean. It was poison and whispers now. 2 days later, Ned rode out alone. No banners, no guards. Only a single horse and a message tucked into his cloak, Rob's terms for Jaime's release. Ned had insisted on writing them himself, fair, honest, just. But as he approached Maidenpool, he saw no sign of fairness waiting for him. The old stone bridge sat over the stream like a scar, broken in places, worn by years. On the other side, Tywin Lannister waited in a black cloak, flanked by 2 guards. Not more, just 2. A performance of peace, but Eddard Stark had not come unarmed. He carried ice, his great sword, across his back. Not to threaten, but to remind. Tywin nodded slightly as Ned dismounted. "Lord Stark," he said coldly, "you are braver than most, and you are bolder than I expected." "A parley?" Ned asked. Tywin raised one brow. "Even I know when a war is." Inconvenient, Ned didn't sit, though a stool had been set out for him. "Speak plainly." Tywin's voice dropped lower. "We both want our sons alive. You have mine. I have influence. I propose a trade. You want Jaime for what?" Tywin smiled thinly. "Peace, a ceasefire. Our banners withdraw. Yours stay. Riverrun stands. And the north remains untouched." It was too easy. Too clean. Ned's instincts flared. "And what of Robert?" he asked. "And Renly? And Stannis?" "They will fall in line if the war cools," Tywin replied. "Or they will die without their wolf. You, Lord Stark. You are the key. You are the voice of reason. They follow you." Ned looked away for a second. The weight of it all rested heavily on his shoulders. Men dying, sons fighting, a kingdom splitting. But he didn't trust this, and the truth, Ned said. "About your daughter, and the false heirs she put on the throne." Tywin's jaw tightened just a fraction. "I offer peace," he said. "But only if you leave the past behind." Ned's hand curled into a fist. "You want me to forget that the king raised another man's sons? That he bled for children that were never his?" "I want you to survive," Tywin replied, colder now. "And your family." Then he added softly, "Because if you don't take this offer, Lord Stark, you won't get another one." That's when Ned noticed the birds, crows, circling above the trees. Too many. He looked around. The woods were too still. No wind, no insects. Just silence and crows. He turned sharply. There were men in the trees, dozens, all Lannister red. All silent, ambush. His instincts flared. He reached for ice, but it was too late. A crossbow bolt flew, striking him through the shoulder. He staggered, dropping to one knee. Another bolt hit his leg. Then the guards rushed forward. Ned swung ice one last time, cutting one man down. But the second drove a blade through his side. Blood poured fast. He fell to the ground, gasping, not dead. But close, above him, Tywin stood still, not surprised, not angry, just watching. "Take him alive," he said. "The war will end with his head, but we need him breathing first." And as Ned Stark slipped into darkness, his last thought wasn't of honor or vengeance. It was of Winterfell and of Robb, because now the wolf had no choice but to rise. When the raven reached Riverrun, Robb Stark was in the war tent, sharpening his sword. His hands stopped moving the moment he saw the seal, the lion of House Lannister smeared in blood. He broke the wax and read the letter once. Then again. He didn't speak. Catelyn watched her son's face go pale, then stone. "What is it?" she asked softly. Robb looked up, and for the first time he looked like his father. "They have him," he said. "He's alive. But barely. The letter was from Tywin himself, mocking, cold, smug. Your Lord Father was injured in the woods. Unfortunate timing. He's under my protection, receiving care. If you want to see him alive again, you will surrender the Kingslayer by sundown tomorrow. It was signed with a lion's paw drawn in ink. Catelyn's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the war table to hold herself up. Robb said nothing for a long while. Then his voice came, quiet but sharp as steel. Ready the army. At King's Landing, Robert Baratheon stormed into the throne room, his voice echoing like thunder. They've taken Ned, he roared. That twisted goat Tywin dares to trap my hand like a dog in the woods. Renly, now openly wearing a golden crown, sat on the edge of the council table, arms crossed. What did you expect? He offered peace, and you let Ned walk into it, Robert spun. And you? While I bleed in the west, you crown yourself with my gold and sleep in my castle. Renly stood, but Stannis stepped between them. Enough, Stannis growled. This isn't the time for royal tantrums. Robert turned to his older brother, chest heaving. They have my friend, my brother, and they want the Kingslayer back for him. Then give him up, Stannis said. Trade one Lannister for one Stark, and when Ned is safe, you send the heads of every Lannister from here to Casterly Rock. Robert stared at him. And you? Stannis nodded. I will lead the fleet. We sail up the Manda, cut through the Reach, and torch every Lannister supply line from the sea. The lions will starve in their golden cages. Robert grinned, a twisted, war-hardened grin. For the first time in my life, I agree with you. In the Riverlands. Robb moved fast. His army swept across the lands like a wolf pack in full charge. No songs, no banners raised, only steel and silence. By dusk they had surrounded Harrenhal. Catelyn rode beside Robb as he stared at the ancient cursed castle. Tywin's inside, she whispered. Robb nodded. Good. That night a scout brought news. Ned was being held in one of the tower cells, guarded by 50 Lannister men. He was alive but barely, fevered, weak, bleeding slowly. Robb gave no grand speech, just a command. We strike at dawn. The Battle of Harrenhal was short and brutal. The North came like a hammer in a storm. They didn't wait for siege towers or rams. They used fire. They used fear, and they used fury. Robb Stark led the charge himself, his sword red before he reached the second gate. Grey wind tore through the courtyard like a demon, his howl rising over the screams of dying Lannisters. By noon, the gates had fallen. By sunset, Robb reached the tower. He found his father lying on a straw-strewn bed, pale and weak, but breathing. Ned turned his head as the door slammed open. His eyes barely focused. Robb, he croaked. Robb dropped to his knees beside him, gripping his father's hand. I've got you. I'm here. A tear fell onto the old wolf's fingers. You've done well, Ned whispered. So well. Robb shook his head. Rest now. It's over. But Ned's eyes flickered one last time. No, he whispered. It's just begun. Then he closed his eyes, and the old wolf of the north was gone. The raven flew for days, across rivers and woods, across fire and storm. When it reached King's Landing, Robert read the message in silence. Ned Stark was dead. Robert didn't speak for hours, not to his council, not to his guards, not even to Stannis, who stood quietly in the shadows. When he finally stood, he walked alone into the throne room, and there, beneath the great iron throne, he dropped his crown. It clattered on the stone, echoing through the empty hall. I was a better warrior than I ever was a king, he said, and then he walked away. In Winterfell, the North mourned, but they also crowned Robb Stark. 19 now, stood beneath the weirwood tree. Sword in hand, men knelt before him. King in the North, they said, and the words rang through the snows of winter like a howl of vengeance. A new king, a young wolf, raised not by ambition, but by grief. And though war had taken his father, burned the land and shattered the realm, Robb Stark had inherited something even more dangerous than a throne: purpose.